Hello everyone, I want to talk. You are betrayed by your family. And it is not a wound like others. For the hand that struck you was once the hand that fed you. The lips that spoke against you once kissed your brow. The eyes that now turn away once shone with pride at your first stumbling steps. And that is why this sorrow lies heavier than the common griefs of life. Why it is sharper than the sword and colder than winter's breath. For in the ordering of the world, there is nothing quite like the home. Nothing fashioned by nature and grace, more suited to shield the heart against the storms of men. And when that fortress falls from within, when those who ought to guard become the thieves at the gate, the loss is not merely of love, but of the very soil in which love was meant to grow. It is the undoing of the ground beneath one's feet, and suddenly all the earth becomes unfamiliar, as though the language of affection has been forgotten, and every gesture of tenderness feels counterfeit. Counterfeit, because the very ones who should have been incapable of treachery have shown themselves capable. And in that hour the soul begins to question whether any bond can be trusted, whether any promise holds weight. For if father may abandon, if mother may betray, if brother may despise, if sister may scorn, then what covenant under heaven is safe, what friendship secure, what vow unshakable? And this is why the betrayed heart does not only bleed, but also doubts its own worth, doubts its capacity to discern sincerity, doubts whether it has been foolish all along in granting its devotion to those who shared its blood. For blood, after all, was thought to be the guarantee, the pledge that no treason could come from within. And when that pledge is broken, the whole structure of meaning collapses like a house with its beams cut, and the soul wanders in the ruin. You are betrayed by your family, and there are no simple words that can soften such a blow. For even the poet who finds comfort in exile, even the warrior who steels himself against the thrust of enemies, even the lonely pilgrim who expects no kindness from strangers, none of these suffer what you suffer, for they knew beforehand where the danger lay. But you, who trusted the hearth, who trusted the table where bread was broken, who trusted the laughter in the long evenings, you are undone by what you never imagined could turn against you. And in that lies the cruelty, that it is not merely pain but surprise, not merely loss but disillusionment, not merely abandonment but reversal, and so your wound festers in silence, because how does one tell it? How does one confess that the betrayal came not from a rival but from a brother, not from a stranger but from a parent? For to speak it aloud feels like desecration, yet to keep it hidden feels like poison. And the soul, trapped between shame and grief, cries in secret where no ear can hear, for it has no language to give shape to this calamity. You are betrayed by your family, and the memory of it does not vanish quickly, for every childhood recollection becomes tainted, every smile in an old photograph becomes a dagger. Every story once told in warmth becomes a mockery, and the heart, instead of drawing strength from its beginnings, finds its beginnings turned against it, so that even the nursery of memory is defiled. And this is perhaps the most terrible thing of all. That betrayal does not only take away the present, it also reaches back into the past and corrupts it, turning gold into rust, bread into stone, laughter into echoes of deceit. And thus you are robbed not only of what is now, but also of what once was, as though time itself has been rewritten. And your whole history, which was supposed to be a treasury of joy, becomes a museum of wounds. Each exhibit a reminder that the very love you thought indestructible was in fact fragile as glass, fragile as smoke, fragile as the fleeting shadow at dusk. You are betrayed by your family, and the world tells you to harden, to grow indifferent, to let the wound scab over and forget. But the truth is you cannot simply forget, for the wound is not only of affection but of identity. For family is not an external possession that can be discarded like a broken tool. Family is woven into the self, stitched into the very fabric of your being. And when it betrays, it is as though the betrayal comes from within, as though some inner organ has turned against you, as though your own heart were conspiring against itself, and so the healing is not swift. It is not like a broken bone that will knit with time. It is more like a broken compass that refuses to point true north, leaving you adrift in a sea of suspicion, uncertain whether the stars above are trustworthy guides or illusions designed to lead you into further disappointment. You are betrayed by your family. And so you learn the bitter paradox that those closest are those most capable of wounding, for the deeper the intimacy, the sharper the blade, and the more sacred the bond, the more sacrilegious its rupture. And though the world may look at you and see no scar, the scar is there in your soul, hidden but enduring, shaping every gesture of trust you will ever offer again, teaching you caution where once you were open, suspicion where once you were generous, silence where once you were free to speak. And perhaps this is the heaviest toll of betrayal, not the single act itself, but the slow erosion of your capacity to love without fear, to hope without reservation, to believe without calculation. And so the betrayal, though it was born in one moment, extends its shadow across a lifetime, and you carry it like an unseen burden, a weight that bends your back though others do not see it, and though you may smile, though you may labor, though you may achieve much, still beneath it all there lingers the whisper that once you trusted utterly, and were utterly undone. And that whisper is enough to make you tremble whenever new bonds beckon, for you cannot wholly forget that the holiest ties are also the most fragile, and that love, though divine in origin, is too often fragile in practice. You are betrayed by your family, and therefore you know the depth of human frailty as few others do, for you have seen the breaking of the most sacred trust. You have tasted the bitterness of love corrupted. You have watched the garden of kinship become a wilderness of thorns. And though others may speak glibly of loyalty, you know its cost. Though others may boast of unshakable ties, you know how easily they may snap. And this knowledge, though it sears, is also a kind of clarity, a hard and sorrowful wisdom, for you walk through the world no longer deceived by the glitter of appearances, no longer lulled by the presumption that family alone guarantees fidelity. You see what others cannot yet see, and though it isolates you, it also makes you sober, vigilant, and strangely awake, for betrayal has stripped you of illusions, and though the stripping was agony, what remains is an honesty about the condition of man, an honesty purchased dearly but real in a way no mere comfort could ever be. And it is in this realism that your soul learns to endure, not because the wound is gone, but because the wound has taught you the truth. And in knowing the truth you find a ground, however bitter, upon which to stand when all else has failed. You are betrayed by your family, and the broken trust within family mirrors the brokenness of the world and reveals the fragile threads of human love. For we imagine that in the small circle of blood we shall find refuge from the storms that rage beyond. We imagine that the cruelty of men, the deception of strangers, the treachery of nations, these may roar outside, but the hearth will remain warm, the home will remain safe, the family will remain faithful. And when that illusion collapses, it is as though the very architecture of life trembles. Because what is family but a picture of the world in miniature? A little kingdom where loyalty is supposed to be learned, a sanctuary where fidelity is supposed to be tested and proven. And if that picture itself is marred, if that sanctuary itself becomes a battlefield, then the world outside appears not only dangerous but hopeless. For if the inner circle has failed, why should the outer circle stand? If the foundation is cracked, why should the building endure? If the roots are rotten, why should the tree bear fruit? And so betrayal within family is not only personal but cosmic, not only private but universal, because it throws suspicion upon the very idea of trust. It casts doubt upon the very possibility of steadfast love, and the wound within becomes a lens through which the entire creation is seen, a lens that colors all with the hue of disappointment. You are betrayed by your family, and in that betrayal you discover that human love, which you once thought so strong, is in fact fragile as glass upon which a careless hand has trodden, as fragile as threads stretched too tight until it snaps, as fragile as a candle flame flickering in the wind. For we like to dress our affections in language of eternity, We promise forever. We swear unbreakable bonds. We boast that blood is thicker than water, and that kinship cannot fail. But life has a way of proving that our boasts are brittle, and the truth is that human love, beautiful though it may be, is subject to the weakness of the flesh, subject to selfishness, to jealousy, to fear, to pride, to the thousand poisons that course through the heart of man. And when those poisons take root even in a household, even in a father or mother, even in a brother or sister, then the love which was thought to be an anchor is revealed to be a reed, swaying, bending, breaking. And suddenly you see what you did not wish to see, that even those closest to you are still human, and humanity is frail, fallible, and fickle. You are betrayed by your family, and when you behold this betrayal, you see the reflection of the world itself. For what is the story of mankind if not one long history of broken trusts, of alliances shattered, of promises discarded, of vows betrayed? And the home was meant to be the place where that story was contradicted, the small haven that proved loyalty possible, the hearth where faithfulness was nourished. But when that too becomes a mirror of the world's corruption, then the hope of contradiction is lost, and all seems like repetition, as though the great cycle of betrayal has written its script even into the cradle, and you feel that there is nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide, for even the innermost sanctuary has been breached, and if it is breached, then what else remains? You look upon the world and see governments betray their citizens, friends betray their friends, lovers betray their vows, children betray their parents, and parents betray their children, and you realize with horror that the betrayal you suffer is not an exception, but a sign of the age. Not an accident, but a pattern, not an isolated sorrow, but a universal ailment, and so your own grief expands into a recognition of the world's grief. Your own wound becomes a window into the world's wound, and you perceive with sorrowful clarity that the world is sick with brokenness, and your family's treachery is but one shard of that shattered mirror. You are betrayed by your family, and so you begin to see that trust itself is a fragile thing, not a fortress of stone, but a bridge of ropes stretched across a chasm, held together by threads that can fray and snap, and yet without that bridge no man can live, for trust is the air of the soul. Without it the heart suffocates. And so the paradox is laid bare before you that we cannot live without trust. Yet trust is always vulnerable. We cannot thrive without love. Yet love is always at risk of corruption. We cannot stand without bonds. Yet bonds can always be broken. And this paradox weighs heavily upon you. For having seen betrayal in your own bloodline, you know the risk is real. And though you long to trust again, though you long to love again, the memory of fragility haunts you, whispering that every thread may snap, every bridge may fall, every promise may prove hollow. And in this way betrayal teaches you not only about your family, but about mankind. That we are creatures who desperately need fidelity, yet are desperately incapable of sustaining it without faltering. Creatures who crave permanence, but are bound to impermanence, who yearn for loyalty yet too often choose self. You are betrayed by your family, and the bitterness of it is sharpened by the knowledge that these very bonds were designed for good, for protection, for nurture, for joy, that the family was meant to be the garden in which love grew strong, not the battlefield where love was destroyed. And so the betrayal is not only painful but perverse. It is love turned against itself, blessing turned into curse, gift turned into weapon. And this perversion is what reveals to you the brokenness of the world most clearly. For what clearer sign of corruption is there than that the very institutions designed for flourishing have become instruments of wounding? That the table meant for fellowship becomes the stage for cruelty. That the roof meant for shelter becomes the place of scorn. That the womb meant for nurture becomes the origin of neglect. And so in the betrayal of family, you see writ small the tragedy of creation. How what was made for good is twisted into harm. How what was meant to heal becomes what wounds. How what was meant to shield becomes what pierces. And you tremble at the sight, for it is no longer simply your story but the story of all. You are betrayed by your family. And so you taste the sorrow of being human, the sorrow that love itself carries risk, that intimacy itself carries the seed of danger. For only those who stand close enough to embrace can also stand close enough to stab, and yet without that closeness life is barren. So that betrayal is the dark shadow that accompanies the light of affection, inseparable, always lurking. And though you long to flee it by fleeing love altogether, you know you cannot, for to cut yourself off from affection entirely would be to deny your own humanity, and thus you are trapped in the tension. Needing love though it may betray, craving trust though it may collapse, desiring family though it may wound. And this tension is not your burden alone, but the burden of mankind, for all across the world men and women wrestle with the same paradox, clinging to fragile threads of love because they are all we have, even though they break again and again. And this is why your betrayal does not isolate you, but connects you strangely to the whole of humanity. For in your wound you see our common wound, and in your family's brokenness you see the world's brokenness. You are betrayed by your family, and though you may think your sorrow unique, it is in fact a window into the universal human condition, and though the world may tell you to hide it in shame, to bury it in silence, the truth is that your wound is the same wound that festers in kings and beggars, in nations and tribes, in strangers and friends. For betrayal is the signature of our age, the mark that has been etched upon all flesh. And when you acknowledge it, you are not alone, but standing with the whole multitude of mankind. And though this realization does not heal the wound, it reveals its meaning, that in your private pain is reflected the cosmic pain. In your small circle of blood is reflected the broken circle of the world. And that is why the ache is so heavy, for it is not simply your ache, it is the world's ache concentrated into your own chest. The cry of humanity echoing in the corridors of your heart, and you carry it like a prophet who feels not only his own sorrow, but the sorrow of his people, the sorrow of the earth itself. You are betrayed by your family, and yet even in betrayal, there stands an invitation toward a higher fidelity, a truer belonging, that no treachery can erase. For when the ground gives way beneath your feet, when the hands that once held you cast you aside, when the voices that once sang your name now speak it with contempt, then in that desolation you are forced to look beyond the visible, beyond the fragile bonds of blood, beyond the faltering love of men, and you begin to sense that there is another love, unbreakable, unchanging, unbetraying, a fidelity that does not falter with weakness, does not corrode with envy, does not bend with fear. And it is in the darkness of betrayal that this higher light becomes visible. For only when the candle goes out do you see the stars. Only when the echo of human promises dies do you begin to hear the whisper of something eternal, something steadfast, something that will not abandon. You are betrayed by your family, and though it shatters you, it also unveils a truth you would not otherwise have grasped, that no human bond, however dear, can bear the full weight of your soul. No mother's arms, no father's counsel, no sibling's loyalty can be your final refuge. For they are flesh like you, fragile like you, frail like you, and if you rest the whole of your being upon them, sooner or later you will feel the crack, the slip, the break. But the betrayal, bitter though it is, teaches you that there is one fidelity that does not crack, one belonging that does not slip, one home that does not break. And though you may rage against the loss, though you may weep over the treachery, yet in the weeping you are being turned toward that higher fidelity, that truer belonging, that place where the word betrayal has no meaning, because the one who calls you his does not forsake. You are betrayed by your family, and you feel yourself cast adrift, like a child left outside the house at night with the door shut and barred. But even as you stand shivering in that night, you find that there is another door, one not made by human hands, one that stands open not because of bloodline, but because of grace, not because of inheritance, but because of mercy. And in that door you discover a belonging that no treachery can take away, a family that no betrayal can fracture. And the strange thing is this, that the very pain which sought to destroy you, becomes the pain that delivers you into something greater. For had your earthly circle never betrayed, you might never have sought the unearthly circle. Had your kin never cast you out, you might never have discovered the kinship that cannot fail. Had your hearth never gone cold, you might never have seen the fire that burns with eternal flame. And so though you curse the betrayal in one breath, you also begin to see how it can lead you into a place where betrayal itself has no power, because the fidelity of the eternal is not subject to the frailty of man. You are betrayed by your family, and your first instinct is to harden, to wall your heart against all future affections, to retreat into loneliness where no one may wound you again. But even in that impulse there lies a temptation to deny the invitation, for the betrayal was never meant to seal you into bitterness. It was meant to open your eyes to a love that transcends the fickleness of human loyalty. And if you yield to bitterness, you will miss the very gift hidden in the grief, the gift of seeing beyond the visible, of reaching for the invisible, of placing your weight not on what fails but on what endures. And this is the paradox that the more fragile human love reveals itself to be, the more necessary it becomes to anchor yourself in the love that cannot falter. And though the betrayal feels like a tearing apart, it is also a clearing away, stripping you of illusions, loosening your grip on the temporary, compelling you to seek the permanent. And in that seeking you find the fidelity that does not betray. You are betrayed by your family, and you cry out in your solitude, wondering if you belong anywhere at all. But the truth that begins to dawn upon you is that you belong most deeply not in the small circle of earthly blood, not in the fragile net of human ties, but in the vast and eternal embrace that claims you before all others. And when you begin to rest in that embrace, you discover that betrayal loses its sting, for betrayal can only wound where loyalty was expected. It can only destroy where permanence was presumed. And when you shift your expectation to the one who cannot betray, then betrayal from man becomes grief, but not annihilation, sorrow, but not despair, wound, but not death. And this is the strange power of the higher fidelity, that it robs betrayal of its ultimate victory. It transforms it from an end into a passage, from a prison into a threshold. And you step through that threshold into a belonging that was always waiting, though you could not see it until the lesser belonging failed. You are betrayed by your family, and you feel yourself despised, unwanted, unloved. Yet in that very rejection lies an unexpected revelation, for you begin to see that your worth is not dependent on their acceptance. Your identity is not confined to their recognition. Your dignity is not sustained by their approval. And once the veil is torn away, you see clearly that the higher fidelity was always holding you, even when they turned away, even when they cast you out, even when they spoke lies about you, even when they left you for dead. And this realization does not erase the grief, but it transforms its meaning. For what you thought was the end of love becomes the unveiling of a deeper love. What you thought was the collapse of belonging becomes the doorway into a greater belonging. And though the path runs through sorrow, it leads into joy that no betrayal can ever threaten. You are betrayed by your family, and though the scar will never vanish, it can become a mark not only of pain, but of transformation, for scars are signs that wounds have closed. And though the skin is never the same, it is stronger where it has healed. And so your betrayal, once it has torn you from illusions, can become the very place where you are bound more securely to the fidelity that does not falter. And others who suffer betrayal may see in you not only the wound, but the witness that it is possible to endure, that it is possible to belong again, that it is possible to love again without fear, not because men will never betray, but because you have learned to anchor your soul in the one who does not. And in this way your betrayal, though it was meant for evil, becomes a testimony of good. Though it was designed to destroy, becomes a witness of hope. Though it was carried out in cruelty, becomes redeemed in fidelity. And the very treachery that scarred you becomes the signpost that points others toward the fidelity you found. You are betrayed by your family, and yet you live on. not as one crushed, but as one transformed, for you have discovered a belonging deeper than blood, a fidelity stronger than kinship, a love unbreakable by treachery. And though the world may betray, though friends may forsake, though lovers may falter, though family may scorn, you have found that which no betrayal can touch, no treachery undo, no abandonment erase, and in that discovery lies a strange freedom, a freedom to love without clinging, a freedom to give without fear, a freedom to hope without despair, because your hope is no longer in the fragile threads of human love, but in the everlasting cord that cannot snap. And so even betrayal, though it has wounded you, cannot define you, for you are held in a fidelity beyond betrayal, a belonging beyond rejection, a love beyond all treachery.